Tonight, the latest on the terror attack at London Bridge, where 7 people were killed last night and dozens injured.
Please, keep moving!
Keep moving!
It happened in an area packed with thousands of people at bars and restaurants in nearby Borough Market. A white van had been driven into pedestrians before 3 men jumped out armed with knives, stabbing people in their path.
When they first see him, they went, "This is for Allah," and they run up, they stabbed this girl, I don't know how many times, 10 times, maybe 15 times, and she was going, help me, and I could not do nothing.
There was widespread panic as police ordered people to take cover as the attackers were still at large. Others fled the area as the sound of loud gunfire filled the air during the rapid response by police officers. Within 8 minutes of the initial alert, the 3 attackers, all wearing fake suicide vests, had been shot dead by armed police. Emergency services say that 48 were injured, some of them critically, as friends and families have spoken of those affected.
He just stepped outside the bar for a second, and a man ran up to him and said, "This is for my family, this is for Islam," and stuck a knife straight in him.
In Downing Street, the Prime Minister condemned what she called the evil ideology of Islamist extremism and called for a new approach.
There is, to be frank, far too much tolerance of extremism in our country. So we need to become far more robust in identifying it and stamping it out across the public sector and across society.
Our priority must be public safety, and I will take whatever action is necessary and effective to protect the security of our people and our country.
During the day in Barking in East London, several homes were raided and 12 arrests were made. And this is the scene tonight, close to London Bridge and Borough Market. We'll have the latest details, the latest analysis and reaction here in Britain and around the world. Good evening from central London. We're in the area just south of London Bridge and Borough Market. This is where, this time last night, 7 people were killed, dozens were injured in a terrorist attack carried out by 3 men who were shot dead by police within minutes of that attack taking place. It was Britain's 2nd major terrorist incident in the space of just 12 days. Now, it began just after 10 o'clock last night when a rented van was used to knock down pedestrians on London Bridge. 3 men wearing fake suicide vests then left the vehicle and began stabbing people in pubs and bars in nearby Borough Market. But within just 8 minutes, the 3 men had been confronted and shot dead by police. A member of the public was also injured in the exchanges. Now, during the day, 12 people were arrested in Barking in East London following a series of raids there. And the Prime Minister, speaking in Downing Street, called for a new approach to combat what she called the single evil ideology of Islamist extremism. Well, in this extended programme tonight, we'll have full details, we'll have reaction, we'll have analysis for you. And we're going to start with our home editor, Mark Easton, whose report does include some distressing images.
And the country cried, "Please, not again," as the first news reports began to break.
We're hearing tonight that the British Armed Police have attended an incident at London Bridge. We don't know any more than that at this stage.
At just after 10 last night, 3 men in a white van drove at speed across London Bridge, determined to kill the spirit of the capital.
Oh my God. There was a white van that came speeding over probably about 50 miles an hour. It turned into the pavement, hit about 3 people in front of me.
Oh my God! Oh.
Close the door, close the door.
Oh my God! Oh my God! No.
There was people just lying everywhere on the bridge, just people trying to help each other out, people bleeding, there was just blood everywhere.
Having deliberately mown down pedestrians, the 3 men got out of the van, knives in their hands, murder on their minds.
They were running up going, "This is for Allah." When they first see him, they went, "This is for Allah," They ran up and started stabbing this girl, 3 of them. I was defenseless, I couldn't do nothing, mate. And then they attacked her, and then they stabbed another guy, I think, if I remember right, that was a bit shocked. They started running up the road, I started going, everybody run, the terrorists, run, and they're stabbing everyone.
It was just stab this person. If they got up, stab them again, move on to the next person. And I was just staring at them from the balcony where I was looking at as they were making their way down to the bar. And just thinking, how could someone do such a thing?
Armed police were on the scene within minutes as the men, seen here, walked calmly towards the packed bars and restaurants of Borough Market.
They were running in all the pubs, all the bars, and they were stabbing everyone. I was going to people, run, I was throwing bottles at them, pint glasses.
People were throwing chairs as well, and it seemed, it seemed like chairs and glasses were just going in both directions.
These 4 friends were settling down for a meal in a Mexican restaurant when the 3 knife men arrived.
Three men come in, and one pulled out a knife and stabbed one of the girls who was sitting closest to the door, and she was only 17.
I kind of got a glimpse of a guy with a knife, and then before I knew it, the doors were shut, and then we were at the back of the restaurant.
So you saw him?
Briefly, like a glimpse.
People were very, very scared. They began to run and knock tables over to try and get out the way, and then very, very quickly, as we said, the men in the restaurant put the shutters down.
In the early hours of this morning, Claudia and Liam, given refuge in a stranger's flat, told me what they saw from their apartment just above a pub the attackers had targeted on their killing spree.
When we were looking out the window, people were running everywhere. You heard a man on the phone saying there's been a stabbing, which...
And it was when I saw lots of people running down into the underground that I thought it seemed a lot more serious, because it was mass panic. It wasn't just at that point, it wasn't just a fight, it was something serious. One young guy seemed to come out of the pub, and he was knocking on the window of the ambulance service saying, he was in a panic saying, you have to help my friend, he's been stabbed, and he's in the pub.
And he's really bleeding.
Whether or not he got stabbed in the pub or outside the pub, I don't know, but he said, my friend's been stabbed, he's in the pub. And there was another guy who was probably in his 40s, standing on the other side of the ambulance, knocking on the other window, saying, I've been stabbed, and he was covered in blood. And he said, I've been stabbed 5 times, you have to help me. But he seemed really calm. He must have been in shock, because he seemed very calm.
And he had his shirt open, and all of this side was just pure blood, and then it was all around his neck, and he was just,
He was just knocking on the window, and he said, you have to help me.
At this time, police cars were still heading up to London Bridge, apparently unaware of where the attackers were.
This one guy walked out in the road, managed to grab the attention of one of the police cars and basically forced them down that road, saying, look, you have to go down Stony Street, you have to go down there. He's down there. And so this one police 4x4 screeched down Stony Street, and then easily within like 5 seconds there were 6 gunshots, or what to us sounded like 6 clear gunshots.
6 rounds, 2 attackers dead, their fake suicide belts still round their waists. Within 8 minutes of the first call to police, the 3rd knife man had also been shot dead. 50 rounds fired altogether, one member of the public suffering a gunshot wound.
It seemed like a big attack was happening, so we wanted to keep the door locked. So I was just having it was terrifying. I was having a mental battle between either the idea of an explosion coming up through the floor or us being out on the street. Which one do we do? Which one do we do? So I shouted down and said, you know, we're still up here, what should we do? And then one of the police officers said, get out, you have to get out of the building now.
It was an attack not just on individuals, but on our way of life. The killers targeted people having fun, enjoying the freedoms of a diverse and liberal city. With daybreak, tales of bravery and heroism emerged from the horrors of the previous night.
I heard truly remarkable stories of extraordinarily brave actions by officers on and off duty who were first on the scene. I also heard of colleagues from other emergency services and members of the public who ran towards the danger as this incident unfolded. Many, many people risked their own safety to help others and to treat those seriously injured, and indeed to confront the suspects involved.
The Prime Minister addressed the nation from Downing Street, giving thanks to those public servants who'd put their lives on the line to protect us all.
On behalf of the people of London and on behalf of the whole country, I want to thank and pay tribute to the professionalism and bravery of the police and the emergency services, and the courage of members of the public who defended themselves and others from the attackers. And our thoughts and prayers are with the victims and with their friends, families and loved ones.
But Mrs May was not just reflecting a nation's shock. She promised the outrage would be met by a response.
It is time to say enough is enough. Everybody needs to go about their lives as they normally would. Our society should continue to function in accordance with our values. But when it comes to taking on extremism and terrorism, things need to change.
London is still trying to come to terms with the awful events, to understand what happened.
This was an appalling act of terror where innocent Londoners and visitors were enjoying a night out in London Bridge and Borough Market and were deliberately targeted by these cowardly terrorists.
Barricaded in bars and restaurants for 2 hours or more, police finally let people leave for home in the early hours, hands on their heads, just in case an attacker was still among them.
The armed police came in and yeah, that was actually really scary. I don't know what I was expecting when they opened the door, but they were shouting to like put our hands on our head and like leave and get out and keep our hands like up, like on our heads or like where visible.
I just want people to know that this is not what London's like. We're a strong, very welcoming, caring city, and this is a terrible thing to happen, but it won't stop us from living our lives, really.
London Bridge is falling down, the song goes, but London appears determined to stand up to those who would divide it. Mark Easton, BBC News, London Bridge.
Well, one of those who witnessed the violent and distressing scenes last night on London Bridge was Holly Jones, who's a BBC journalist. She's been describing how she narrowly missed being hit by the van as it struck other pedestrians who were around her. Holly has been giving her account to our special correspondent, Lucy Manning.
A walk across a bridge, but some didn't make it to the other side. Before the police, the ambulances, the terror, there were tourists taking photos, couples holding hands, and Holly Jones crossing the bridge late to meet friends for a drink. Today, the sun, the park, people smiling, things she thought she would never see.
The van was zigzagging along the pavement and it looked like it was aiming, from my opinion, it was aiming for groups of people. He hit 2 people in front of me that were about 5 metres in front, swerved back round again. I don't know how I did it or what I did, but I got out of the way. I don't know if I jumped or if I ran. And I remember moving and watching the van drive into the couple that were behind me and obviously hit them. You know, I just remember thinking that was so close, that was so close for me. And the screams, it was like a shrill. I've never heard kind of like a fear like it. But even so, I just ran towards the victims, and the lady who was behind me was the closest person, so naturally I just ran to her. Told her I spoke French, asked her if she spoke English, she said she didn't. Just kept telling her everything was going to be okay. I was holding her hand, and because I realised there wasn't the person that was with her, and she kept asking, where's my boyfriend, where's my boyfriend? I just shouted at the person, a pedestrian next to me who wasn't injured. I said, look over the river, can you see anyone in the water? And at that point, that's when she started shouting to alert the boats to say there might be someone in there.
Your first thought was to help, it wasn't to run away and get out of there?
I did what anyone else would have done in my situation. I almost feel quite fortunate that I was with that lady, because there were several other casualties on the bridge who were just, it's indescribable the state they were in. You never think you're going to see something like that.
You okay?
Yeah.
Must have been really, really tough to see.
It was, but as I say, I'm just so incredibly lucky. So incredibly lucky. I'm just glad that I'm glad I was there to help people. I'm just glad that I'm happy that I was there to help and try and stay as calm and professional and just get on with things.
Holly was one of the first to call 999, and the police have interviewed her as a significant witness.
When you saw the driver, you looked into the driver's eyes.
Yep. I saw the driver of the vehicle, and definitely intentional. You know, he didn't look scared, he just looked focused, and I'd almost like to say the word demented. That's what he looked like. And at this point, that was when he was heading straight towards me.
And how do you feel being in London now, given what you've experienced last night?
I plead with people not to be scared, not to be angry, because this is exactly what those people want us to feel. And we have to stand together. Go home, tell your friends, tell your family that they love them, and carry on doing exactly what you're doing.
You've obviously had just the luckiest escape.
Yeah.
How do you feel thinking back to those events last night?
I am just so grateful and thankful for everything I have. Just so lucky, you know. It was 1 meter away from, and I'm just so grateful, so thankful. I will never take my life for granted.
Holly Jones there talking to our special correspondent Lucy Manning. Well, we know that 4 police officers were among those injured in the course of the attack. One was off duty and was stabbed as he struggled with one of the attackers. Another was a British Transport Police officer who, despite being unarmed, confronted one of the suspects. And it's been confirmed that people from France and Spain, Australia and New Zealand are also among those injured. And tonight, the first victim has been named as Christine Archibald, who's from Canada. Our correspondent Sarah Campbell reports on the people who were caught up in last night's attack.
Daniel O'Neill, who's 23, is recovering in hospital. One of the many pub and restaurant goers attacked at random. The shock and anger is palpable from his mother.
He just stepped outside the bar for a second and a man ran up to him and said, "This is for my family, this is for Islam," and stuck a knife straight in him. He's got a 7-inch scar going from his belly round to his back. I'm still in shock. I still can't quite believe it's happened. Absolutely senseless, the attacks. And these people say they're doing it in the name of God, which is an absolute joke. The first commandment is thou shalt not kill. All faiths share that belief. If it wasn't religion, they'd find some other excuse. They're callous, they're barbaric, and they're absolute cowards.
There are many more victims. Brett Freeman, a father of 3, was stabbed 4 times and is pictured in hospital. Jeff Ho, the business editor for the Sunday Express newspaper, was stabbed in the neck. He was filmed, injured and being led away, having stepped in to help a wounded bouncer.
That's Jeff all over. He will not run away from anything. If Jeff sees a situation, Jeff will go into it. That's the frightening thing with Jeff, is he focuses on other people. He loves other people, and if he can help, he will help.
Initially, the injured were taken to 5 different hospitals across London, including here at St Thomas's. This is a cosmopolitan city, and that's very much reflected in the nationalities of those who found themselves caught up in last night's attack.
It's now known that a French citizen was killed and a Canadian woman named as Chrissy Archibald. Her family said she would have had no understanding of the callous cruelty that caused her death. New Zealander Oliver Dowling, according to a Facebook post by his sister, has been operated on after having been stabbed multiple times. Candice Hedge from Australia, who reportedly worked in a local restaurant, was having a meal with her boyfriend when she was attacked. Also injured 4 police officers, 1 from the British Transport Police and 3 from the Metropolitan Police Force. One of the Met officers, who was off duty at the time, tackled one of the armed men and remains in a serious condition. The emergency services have been praised for their quick response, both during the attack and in its aftermath, when so many lay injured.
I think people obviously felt tremendous empathy and sympathy with the victims, which we always do, but it was an incident that could have happened to any of us, that, couldn't be foreseen, and clearly the patients were extremely shocked in the non-medical sense.
The This 19-year-old American student found himself desperately trying to help stem the flow of blood from a man who was hit in the head by a stray bullet.
We knew that somehow we need to stop this overwhelming rush of blood from the wound. So at that point, we knew that we needed to somehow apply pressure onto it to stop it at least a little bit. So then that's when we took off my belt and used it as a tourniquet to stop the flow of blood.
Were you surprised to hear that he had survived?
I was very surprised. I couldn't sleep a minute last night just wondering about this guy, if he made it or not. And to find out that he did is definitely a huge relief.
The list of the names and faces of those who were injured or killed in the attack will grow longer, each one an innocent victim. Sarah Campbell, BBC News.
Well, the information earlier this evening was that 48 people were injured in last night's attack on London Bridge and in the Borough Market area, 21 of them sustaining serious injuries, and they are being treated at several hospitals in the London area. Let's talk to our health editor, Hugh Pym. Now, he's at King's College Hospital, that's in Camberwell in southeast London. And Hugh, can you give us the latest on the figures for the injured that you have?
Yes, Hugh, of those 48 taken to hospitals last night, 5 hospitals in London, 36 are still there, including some here at King's College Hospital. 21 of those are in critical care, some of those very seriously injured, and the hospital with the largest number of people in that situation is this one, King's College. And in fact, the Prime Minister Theresa May paid a short visit earlier today. Now, this hospital, along with others, is part of a major trauma network across the capital. They know their precise roles in this sort of situation. They have well-rehearsed plans for just the sort of scenario which unfolded last night. So the London Ambulance Service knows precisely which hospitals to take different types of casualties, including those with gunshot or knife wounds, and that's what happened last night. The London Ambulance Service, of course, very quickly on the scene. 6 minutes the first paramedics took to actually get there. So that all went entirely according to plan, and at hospitals they had major incident plans to bring in extra staff overnight. They didn't know how many casualties they'd have to deal with, but they brought in extra doctors and nurses, and that went according to plan as well. And Simon Stevens, the head of NHS England, said today that he paid tribute to the professionalism of staff and their bravery as they moved towards danger as they went about their business of tending to patients and saving lives.
Hugh, thanks very much again. Hugh Pym there, our health editor, with the latest for us at King's College Hospital in South London. Now, as we mentioned earlier, police raided several properties today in Barking, that's an area of East London. They arrested 12 people in connection with last night's attack. One of the homes raided is believed to be where one of the attackers had been living. Our special correspondent, Ed Thomas, has the latest now on the extensive police investigation.
Tonight, the focus of the police investigation, a block of flats in Barking. Here, women were escorted from the building. This video clip was taken by those living inside. Armed police surround men lying on their floor, their hands behind their backs. So far, 12 people have been arrested. The BBC also understands one of the London attackers who died lived here. We're not naming him at the request of the police, but we've spoken to this man who says he knew him. He says over the past 2 years, the attacker became more and more extreme.
We spoke about a particular attack that happened, and like most radicals, he had a justification for anything, for everything and anything. And that day I realised that I need to contact the authorities.
He'd only speak to the BBC's Asian network as long as we protected his identity and changed his voice.
He used to listen to a lot of Musa Jibril. I've heard some of this stuff and it's very radical. I'm surprised some of this stuff is still on YouTube and easily accessible. I phoned the anti-terrorist hotline. I spoke to the gentleman. I told him about our conversation and why I think he's been radicalised.
We've put these allegations to the police. The friend believes the attacker was not arrested even after he was reported.
I did my bit. I know a lot of people did, but the authorities didn't do their bit.
Is that him?
Yes, another guy.
This couple say they also reported the same man to police more than 2 years ago after he tried to befriend their children. What did you think they were doing?
Radicalizing the kids. Sorry, the message was clear.
And if you are not Muslim, you don't follow in the religion of Muslim basic France, you're basically going to hell.
He said to me, because the kids need to be saved. Saved from what? From this world.
We still don't know if any chances to stop these men were missed. For now, the focus is on a search for evidence and answers. This is now the heart of the investigation. It started with anti-terror raids just hours after the attack, and now forensic teams are focused on this ground floor flat at the side of the block. And this was East Ham this evening. A man scrambles across a rooftop as armed officers train their guns at the windows. This investigation is still far from over. Ed Thomas, BBC News, Barking in East London.
So where do we stand tonight then with the state of the police investigation? Let's go to New Scotland Yard. Our Home Affairs correspondent Daniel Sanford is there. Daniel, what's been established so far?
Well, I think police made good progress today, to be honest with you. They quickly identified the three main suspects, the three men that they'd already shot dead. That allowed them to quickly get to Barking, to raid those two addresses in northeast London and to arrest 12 people, 7 women and 5 men, though one of those men has since been released. Whether or not any of that group will actually end up being charged, I'm not so sure, because they were essentially known associates and family members that the police got to quickly, and obviously were wanting to question quickly, but that may not ultimately lead to charges. And I think we also learned an awful lot about the new reality of policing counter-terrorism last night. It took 8 armed officers firing 50 rounds to try and prevent any further loss of life. It was an unprecedented use of aggressive force by police in this country, but of course that use of aggressive force has its risks. A member of the public being shot and injured, though thankfully not seriously so.
Daniel, we mentioned the fact, of course, that it's a comprehensive, it's a very extensive inquiry at this stage. Talk to us about the next few days and the kind of scope of the investigation as we look ahead.
Well, I think we can expect more raids and more arrests in the next few hours. I think that's inevitable as police learn more about these men and try and expand their knowledge about them. But as we've discussed 3 times now this year, one of the key questions is going to be whether this was a group of men who plotted alone, or whether they had a wider group of people that were assisting them here in the UK, or whether indeed they were being guided from overseas. And I think at this stage police are not yet sure about the answers to those questions. And I think there's a very important other aspect to the policing in the days and weeks ahead, and that is going to be reassurance, because after 3 attacks in 3 months, there is a concern amongst the police, the security services and government that frankly members of the public are going to start to panic, start to worry whether or not the police and the security services are in control of this issue, and they'll be wanting to reassure the public that they're doing everything they can to prevent further loss of life and to reduce further loss of life.
Daniel, again, thanks very much. Daniel Sanford there, Home Affairs correspondent at Scotland Yard. And as Daniel was underlining there, this is the 2nd terrorist attack in Britain in under a fortnight, and as he was saying, the 3rd in the space of 3 months. Earlier today, the Prime Minister, speaking in Downing Street after chairing the Cabinet's Emergency Committee, she was calling for a new approach to tackle what she called the single evil ideology of Islamist extremism. Our security correspondent Frank Gardner looks now at the options as they currently stand within the intelligence community for tackling the terrorist threat.
March the 22nd, Westminster. A lone attacker uses a 4x4 and knives to murder pedestrians and a policeman. May the 22nd, Manchester Arena. A suicide bomber kills 22 people, including children. And June the 3rd, London. Terrorists kill 7 and injured dozens using a truck and knives. Armed police have spent years training for exactly these sort of marauding attacks. They now have more powerful weapons, better intelligence, and a faster reaction time than ever before. Yet what they're up against is a growing problem.
The country needs to wake up to the fact that this is an increasing, not a decreasing threat, both globally and, of course, within our midst, within our communities here in the UK. It's an increasing threat that needs to be confronted head-on. And it's not just in terms of resource for intelligence agencies and for the police. We need to confront it in terms of its ideology and the theology that's driving this threat.
Also driving it is the imminent loss of IS's self-proclaimed caliphate in Syria and Iraq. After 2 years of brutal rule,
the jihadists look set to be driven out of both Mosul and Raqqa. Their fugitive leaders are calling for revenge attacks in Europe. A former Islamist says the West is damned by jihadists, whatever it does.
Where we do intervene in foreign policy, we are blamed by jihadists, such as in Iraq. And where we don't intervene, like in Syria, we're blamed yet again by jihadists for not caring about Muslim lives. The only factors that are consistent out of these are the identity crisis and the ideological narrative. That's something we can do something about. We need to foster the kind of society in which people feel they belong.
Meanwhile, the advice given by the Metropolitan Police to the public is blunt. In the event of a terrorist attack, they're telling people to run, tell and hide, at least until the threat is dealt with. The scale of the terrorist threat is daunting. At least 500 active plots under investigation, around 3,000 subjects of interest being monitored, and a further 20,000 individuals in a wider network. 3 terrorist attacks getting through in just 3 months throws an uncomfortable spotlight on MI5, the security service behind me. It's their job to try and provide the intelligence to stop these before they happen. And they have helped do that successfully 18 times in the last 4 years. But now, the scale of the problem facing this country is causing some to question whether they can cope with what they're up against. GCHQ, the government's listening station, is engaged in a constant battle to break into terrorist communications. A former independent reviewer of terrorism legislation believes tech companies should do more.
Well, I think there is a need for change in approach. Some years ago, one of the big tech companies said to me, "We're merely a library." That just won't do. There now has to be law that makes it clear to them that they're not merely a library. They are big companies. They have the economies bigger than many nations, and they have a responsibility to all of us to ensure that unlawful terrorist content does not appear on the internet anymore.
Tonight, Britain remains at threat level severe, the second highest below critical, meaning a further attack is thought highly likely. That threat is unlikely to subside soon. Frank Gardner, BBC News.
Well, there are some new developments that we can now discuss tonight, and with me is our security correspondent, Gordon Carrera. Gordon, what have you learned?
Well, in the last few moments, there's been a statement from so-called Islamic State claiming that a security unit of its fighters, is the way they described them, carried out the London attacks. Now, the group frequently claim attacks for which they were in no way involved, so we shouldn't automatically take that as IS involvement. But I think in this case, the security services will be investigating this very seriously. They're already looking at a number of elements of this attack. I mean, we've had 3 attacks in the last few months. Khalid Massoud in Westminster acted alone. Salman Abedi acted alone, but perhaps had some kind of support in Libya. In this case, though, you had a group of 3 people. And the security services will want to know what connected those people. Were they a group of friends? Were they part of some other group? Were any of them known to the security services before? That's quite likely. But secondly, what triggered this attack? Just yesterday, there was a propaganda poster from so-called Islamic State which featured a picture of a white truck, a knife and a gun, and called on people to kill civilians using these. Now, was that the inspiration? Well, perhaps, although this group might have been planning it for longer, but it could have been seen by the group as an instruction to go ahead and carry out an attack. So the security services will be looking at that very closely, trying to understand if there was contact with IS abroad in any way. And I think that internet propaganda also explains why you heard such a tough line from the Prime Minister about the internet today. Finally, the threat level has not gone up to critical. We saw that after Manchester, where there were concerns about more material that could have been used to make bombs. It's not gone up in this case. I think if it does go up, that would be a worrying sign that they think are other people connected to this group who could be dangerous. If it remains where it is, they will hope that the threat from this group has now passed, has stopped. But of course, it still means that another terrorist attack by some other group is still highly likely.
Gordon, thank you very much for the latest update there. Gordon Carrera there, our security correspondent. Well, last night's attack happened just 4 days, as we know, before the general election, which will go ahead as planned on Thursday. National campaigning was suspended by all the major parties today except for UKIP. The Prime Minister insisting that established methods of tackling extremism had to change. We've been talking about that a little, and that there'd been far too much tolerance of extremism in our country. Those are the words she used. Our political correspondent Alex Forsyth reports now on more of the political reaction to last night's attacks.
For the second time in 2 weeks, the flags at half-mast, a mark of respect. For the same reason, the election debate deliberately muted most of today. The politicians did come out to universally condemn this attack and praise the emergency services. And from the Prime Minister, this time much tougher talk on tackling terrorism too.
We cannot and must not pretend that things can continue as they are.
Theresa May called for action around the world to stop internet firms allowing extremism online, a review of the UK's counter-terrorism strategy, and she warned across society there was too much tolerance of extremism.
While the recent attacks are not connected by common networks, they are connected in one important sense. They are bound together by the single evil ideology of Islamist extremism that preaches hatred, sows division, and promotes sectarianism.
Here, it seems, an attempt to offer more than platitudes about the country's protection, the direction clear, but at this stage little detail about what that means, not least for some Muslim communities who too have a sense of anger.
Muslim communities across the UK are outraged at what's happened. We've had 3 terror attacks in the last 3 months, and that's something that's intolerable for anyone who lives in this country. We want to work together with our government, with our civil society, to tackle terrorism wherever we find it.
Labour's answer, after barely a break in the campaign, criticising the Conservatives over police funding, promising more officers. The party leader keen to quash any perception that he'd be soft on terror.
I will take whatever action is necessary and effective to protect the security of our people and our country. That includes full authority for the police to use whatever force is necessary to protect and save life, as they did last night, as they did in Westminster in March.
All parties are determined democracy won't be derailed. The election will take place on Thursday. The preparations continue. The campaigns will resume in full tomorrow. And now, again, the nation's safety at the heart of the debate.
UKIP says there's been an unwillingness to confront extremism in the past.
We've got to fight fire with fire. I wouldn't take anything off the table in dealing with these people. There's a small number of people in this country who quite clearly hate who we are, hate the way we live and want to destroy our democracy. They are a cancer and they need to be cut out.
In Scotland, a warning: robust action must not lead to the persecution of any community.
The terrorists win if we allow ourselves to become divided, and they do so if we allow our freedoms and our civil liberties to be undermined. That is what acts of terrorism are designed to do, to divide and to undermine the values that define who we are.
This, once again, has become a balancing act between the need for security and action and the protection of civil liberties.
What we must do is work together to make sure that we tackle terrorism in a very practical and effective way and do it together. What we must not do is to trade away our freedoms, our great British freedoms, in response to the cowardly acts of these pathetic people last night. If we did that, they would have won.
But today, in the fight against terrorism, any sense of victory feels far away, any answers hard to come by. One thing many here are holding on to: an attack designed to undermine democracy has only strengthened the will of those determined to protect it. Alex Forsyth, BBC News, Westminster.
Let's stay with the political context. Let's go live to Downing Street, and our political editor Laura Koonsberg is there. And Laura, tell us a little more about how you read the political response today.
Well, Hugh, certainly Theresa May's message was a very blunt and uncompromising one, but of course also at an extremely politically sensitive time. When she said enough is enough, what did she actually mean? Well, I understand that they are considering looking at lengthening the prison sentences for people who are convicted of more minor charges connected with extremism. They're also potentially looking at creating some new criminal offences. And as we've heard many times before, Theresa May also very much wants to crack down on the approach that's taken by some tech companies. Are they doing enough to try to identify the kind of messages of hate being spread across their platforms? But, you know, she has suggested some of these kinds of things before. The difference now, the message from Number 10, is a real change in the frequency of the threat. One Whitehall source said to me it is now on an unprecedented scale. Just since March, seeing 3 attacks get through and another 5 plots being foiled. And if you go back in the preceding 4 years, the equivalent number is only around a dozen, as I understand it. But of course, one of the political problems for Theresa May in all of this is she was Home Secretary for 6 years before moving in here. And we've seen tonight Jeremy Corbyn, the Labour leader, on the political attack, criticising her for cutting police numbers and saying that you cannot protect the public by doing it on the cheap.
As I said, Laura, 4 days to polling day, this coming Thursday. Are we in a position tonight to say anything about the possible impact of this terrorist incident on the remaining campaign?
Well, I think certainly logistically it slammed the brakes on what should have been a sort of frantic day of campaigning, the last Sunday before any general election. It created a brief window, but by this evening Jeremy Corbyn was back on the stump. Tomorrow morning Theresa May will be making a big speech and touching very much on this issue. I think, of course, it's important to remember that voters around the country, our viewers, make up their minds on all sorts of issues. But very clearly what's happened in the last fortnight has put security on the agenda in this election in a way that nobody could have expected it to be at the start. And for some people, that could well be a defining factor.
Laura, once again, thank you very much. Laura Kunsberg there, our political editor, with the latest on the political response there in Downing Street. Well, talking of responses, the response of Londoners caught in last night's attack, as well as the emergency services, has been praised as extraordinary by the Metropolitan Police. The Commissioner said that those who ran towards danger as the events unfolded to help people in need had showed exceptional and notable courage. But as facing the threat of attacks made people change their way of life in some way, our special correspondent Fergal Keane has been asking some Londoners for their thoughts.
It's not in the nature of London to succumb to cowed silence in the face of violence. There's the energy of the present, and too much history, too much stored in the city's long memory for panic.
Defiant. You know, I thought, no, I'm going to work today, I'm carrying on as normal, and I think that's what Londoners should do, just carry on as normal.
I think people are very resilient. Everybody's shocked today, but we all knew that it was a possibility because we don't live behind tall fences all the time. We don't pull up bollards on the edge of all our pavements. We know that it could happen at any time.
The mantra of defiance is everywhere in the wake of terror attacks, and it is genuine, but there are other narratives. In this part of London's East End, more than 40% of the population is Muslim. And in Bilal's barber shop, there was condemnation of the violence, but also fear.
It's very bad. It shouldn't be happen that, because all majority like we live together, and we're gonna stand up together against terrorists.
Anything that happens, you know, the first person to be called out is Muslims. You know, it's a Muslim person. And it's really sad because obviously we are not terrorists, Muslims are not terrorists, and as Muslims we don't feel safe even more.
Across Britain, Muslim communities are debating their responses to the terror of men claiming to act in their name. Rabia Ahmed recently graduated with a first in law and hopes to work in the city. She believes the attacks must lead to greater integration.
In times like this, we do need to make more of an effort to integrate, whether you're Muslim or not, and to come together, because the point of attacks like this is the fact that they want to divide everyone. They want it to be separate communities.
The very same questions were posed in the wake of the 7/7 bombings. But the dissemination of extreme Islamist ideology continued, fueled by the internet, by radical preachers, declaring a religious obligation to slaughter as revenge for Western action in the Middle East, and because the lives of unbelievers were considered worthless. Sajda Mughal is a Muslim survivor of the 7/7 bombings who's been honoured for her work fighting extremism.
It was something that was brushed under the carpet, so we have moved on in terms of we're talking about it more, but what we now need is a whole community approach. And I have to say, within some mosques, they need to be talking about the issue more. They need to be protecting young people and actually deterring them away from radicalisation.
In this same area, the extremism of British fascism was defeated in the 1930s. An ideology of hate and supremacy defeated by a community acting together. Beatty Orwell is a 100-year-old Jewish veteran of that struggle and of the Blitz of World War II. Hers is a quintessential London voice. Beatty, from your experience of fighting fascism, what is the most important thing to defeat extremism?
You've got to fight them back. Try and shut them up and get rid of them.
Do you think that it's a battle that can be won?
Yeah, sure, I think so. We're strong enough here. We've got enough police, and we've got clever people, we're no fools.
As after 7/7 at Manchester, the mood on the streets is one of defiance and resilience. But each attack tests that further. A great deal depends now on the ability of the security forces to contain the violence, and on the capacity of political and community leaders to tackle the roots of extremism.
And so vigilance and the certain knowledge that the struggle ahead will be long and fought on many fronts. Fergal Keane, BBC News, London.
Well, world leaders have been expressing their support and sympathy for the people of the UK and their outrage at what has happened. Germany, France and Russia sent messages of condolence. So too did President Trump, but he combined his message with criticism of the Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan. Our diplomatic correspondent James Landale reports now on the global reaction.
This evening in Berlin, a demonstration of solidarity with London, on a gate that, these days at least, is a symbol of European unity and peace. Over in Brussels, the flag stood once again at half-mast, as leaders around the world express their now familiar litany of shock and sympathy.
We send our heartfelt sympathy and love to the victims and their families. This attack is yet another cruel example of the new reality with which we live.
Other leaders use social media to express their horror and solidarity. President Putin of Russia spoke of the cruelty and cynicism of the attack. And Chancellor Merkel said that in the fight against terrorism, Germany is resolutely at Britain's side. In Rome, the Pope led prayers for peace that were echoed by other Christian leaders.
May the Spirit give peace to the entire world, heal the plagues of war and of terrorism that even tonight in London hit innocent civilians.
It is right that when there is great evil that we feel anger, but that anger must be turned on its head into a commitment to justice and not against any group of people, especially members of the Islamic community.
In New York, the authorities increased security across the city, particularly in areas full of pedestrians and tourists, like here in Times Square. Donald Trump called Theresa May to offer his condolences, but on Twitter the president used the incident to renew his demand for a travel ban on visitors from 6 mostly Muslim countries. And he also appeared to criticise the Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, for saying there was no need to be alarmed. In fact, Mr Khan was urging people not to be worried by the increased police presence on London's river and its streets. His spokesman said he had more important things to do than respond to Mr Trump's ill-informed tweet. From Paris, which has seen its share of terror attacks, President Macron called Theresa May to say that France was at Britain's side. And France's Prime Minister visited a crisis centre monitoring events in London.
La France et le Royaume-Uni.
France and the United Kingdom are allies that have been subjected to a common threat, and we will be united in our joint response to it.
Ensemble.
France is holding its own parliamentary elections at the moment, and as a result of last night's attack, security has been tightened up here in London at polling stations where French nationals living in the UK are already casting their votes. Few elections, it seems, can escape the shadow of terrorism. James Landau, BBC News, Central London.
Well, the attack here in London came, as we know, less than 2 weeks after the bombing at the Manchester Arena, in which 22 people were killed and dozens of people were injured as they left a concert by the American singer Ariana Grande. Well, tonight she's been holding a benefit event with other performers at the Old Trafford cricket ground. And our correspondent Judith Morris is there. We can join her now.
Hugh, and the crowd has left here now in good spirits. The police tell us that out of 50,000 people at this event, they only made one arrest because nobody here was in any doubt as to the reason for this concert. Before it began, there was a minute's silence throughout the show. There were tributes to the lost and to the injured. And above the stage, there were 22 lights, one for every one of the victims of the Manchester attack. They came to dance, to sing, and to remember. She was the artist they most wanted to see, and the voice they'd waited to hear. She was joined by children from a Manchester school. There were tears and hugs, and then Ariana Grande revealed that she'd met the mother of one of the teenagers who died at the arena.
I had the pleasure of meeting Olivia's mommy a few days ago. And as soon as I met her, I started crying, and I gave her a big hug. And she said that I should stop crying because Olivia wouldn't have wanted me to cry. And then she told me that Olivia would have wanted to hear the hits.
Many of the injured were determined to be here, defiant despite memories which are still fresh.
Oh my God.
14-year-old Natalie Harrison was filmed caught up in the panic after the explosion. Today, Natalie and her mum came to the concert, but it wasn't an easy decision.
It's been a traumatic time, and the only thing that I would say is that for me it's a bit too soon, because I feel that I'm only just coming to terms with what happened.
So coming back today, how does it feel?
It's exciting because I want to see Ariana without coming home being upset.
And do you think it will help you then, coming back and having a good experience?
Yeah, it'll probably help me like heal and stuff.
Security was tight and visible, and everywhere there were stories of strength and resilience.
We heard the bang, and I got hit in my upper left thigh, and I had to go to hospital and have an operation on it. I'm really excited, yeah, because I just really enjoy concerts. It's not going to stop me.
Artists flew in from all over the globe to take part, many with words of support for the UK.
Manchester, London, we are here and we are together and we are one. I just want to take this moment to honor the people that were lost or that were taken. We love you so much. To the families, we love you so much.
The atmosphere here is a real mix of celebration and commemoration. Plenty of tears mixed in with the cheers from this audience. It's hoped that millions of pounds have been raised to support the bereaved and injured, and that just being at the concert has helped many of the survivors. There were people both in the audience and on the stage here who visibly found this a difficult experience, coming a fortnight or so after the explosion. Now, the Red Cross had counsellors on hand here to provide support for those who needed it. recognising perhaps that amongst all the talk of staying strong and remaining defiant, it's not easy for everyone. Hugh.
Judith, again, thanks very much. Judith Moritz there, our correspondent at Old Trafford at that event there this evening. Mark Easton is with me, our home editor. A real sense in Manchester tonight, Mark, really along the lines that we've discussed in recent weeks about the remarkable spirit of Manchester. What is your sense of the spirit of this city today?
Well, London, of course, is a city that has sadly experienced terrorism on many occasions. And like Manchester, what we saw 2 weeks ago in Manchester has always shown great resilience. It's a city that I think thrives on its liberal values, on its tolerance, and indeed celebrates its diversity. That's really part of it. Almost every country in the world is represented here, every culture, and people, for the most part, get along, and many people celebrate that multicultural nature of London. It is actually, for a city of its size, it is one of the safest, most peaceful cities in the world. And having met people last night and again today who were caught up in the horrors and saw really awful things, my sense is that, you know, despite all of that, despite the pain and the violence and the death, actually this is a city that will once again simply refuse to be terrorised.
Mark, thank you very much. Mark Easton there with his thoughts for us this evening, our home editor. And on that note, that's it for tonight. Continuing coverage of the aftermath of the London Bridge attack on the BBC News channel. More details on BBC News Online as well. But now on BBC One, it's time to join our news teams where you are. Have a good night.